Norwich City have appointed Philippe Clement as their new head coach. The Belgian was sacked by Rangers back in February and has signed a 3.5-year deal. He takes over from Liam Manning with the Canaries second from bottom. We didn't get any sniff that Clement was in the running for the job until very late on. Around 24 hours before, it looked as if former Blackburn manager Jon Thomason was getting the job. So came completely out of nowhere. But it's got to be said, a very interesting appointment, Justin Peach.
Yeah, very interesting. He's the first Clement to manage in this league since Paul. As far as I know, they're not related either. It could be. Paul and Phil. Paul Clement, obviously, former Derby and
Clement. Let's make it clear. He's from London.
Phil Clement's from London as well, if you wanted to get down the accent route. But look, there were three candidates there for Norwich that I was impressed by. There's obviously Jon Thomason, Gary O'Neill, and Phil Clement. They are. I'd have been content with any of those. Obviously, Clement came out of the blue. I do admit my eyebrows were initially raised because my immediate thought went to how acrimonious his departure was from Rangers last February. But reading into him a little bit more, I am impressed. I actually think it's a coup, Ryan.
Yeah, it's been really fascinating seeing what Rangers fans have been saying about it because, like you, I don't follow Scottish football that closely. And I remember seeing loads of noise at the time of Clement's sacking saying it had to happen. But the vast majority of Rangers fans I'm seeing say they think he's actually better than the Norwich job. I think a lot of them have a lot of respect for him despite how things ended there, and maybe Russell Martin doing so terribly afterwards has kind of helped him out a bit with that. But the main reason why Rangers fans say he didn't succeed there is because the atmosphere was toxic and because Rangers are a bit of a basket case. And he even admitted himself he wasn't helped by the chaos going on in the boardroom there. Yeah. The thing I would say about that is Norwich aren't exactly in the greatest of places right now themselves. The atmosphere recently has been past toxic. So while Clement probably is a talented manager, it wasn't long ago that he was managing Monaco. What is ultimately going to decide how this goes is how he deals with the toxicity. Because while I imagine there'll be a reprieve initially for a new manager, Ben Napper, the sporting director, is still at the club. Most of the chanting at Norwich in recent weeks has been aimed at him over Liam Manning. And so that negativity at the club will very quickly reappear if Clement doesn't get off to a good start. And Ben Napper really needs this to be a success, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I think the issue that Ben Napper has is it's all in Clement's hands, whether Ben Napper gets heat or not, whether that toxicity builds, because Liam Manning's been that shield, I think, for a lot of the heat that Ben Napper has had to face. I know there's been a lot, but there's been large quantities, large volumes of heat, and it has been at both ends, but Liam Manning's taken a lot. And therefore, Philippe Clement, he's going to be that new shield. And if he gets off to immediate success, where he starts to pick up points quite quickly, then I think that starts to die down. And also, Ben Napper, things start to calm down. But without doubt, annoyingly, if it is a success, a lot can be forgotten in terms of the shit show that preceded Clement. And that's ultimately what I'm measuring Ben Napper by here. Clement could win the championship this season or next season. Ben Napper arguably should not be in that job.
Yeah, I'm not sure Clement is going to be setting his sights on the championship this season, but if he is, I admire his bravery. Yeah, I think the first thing he's got to do is build the confidence back in the players, hasn't he? Because that's unsurprisingly on the floor after how things have gone so far. But if you get someone like Josh Sargent firing again, that's obviously a very good start. What's also good news for someone like Sargent is when Clement was at Monaco, in his only full season there, they were the top scorers in the division behind only PSG. His Rangers team scored a lot of goals as well. And he's spoken before about how he likes his teams to prioritise scoring goals over keeping them out. So
brilliant.
That sounds good from our perspective. One thing I would say is he's not a manager who puts a lot of emphasis on possession, which is quite the contrast to what Norwich were doing under Johannes Hofturup last season when they were the team at the second highest possession in the league. Ben Napper made it clear that was how he wanted his teams to play, but is seemingly drifting further and further away from that. But you look at what Clement has achieved as a manager in recent years. You look at some of the jobs he's been linked with recently, including Ajax and the Belgian national team. I get what you're saying. It does feel like a bit of a coup for Norwich getting him in their current guise, and even admitted he went into talks with low expectations and was then swayed around by the vision for the club. Whether this all goes plain sailing is another question, but I do agree with you to an extent, Justin. It does feel like quite the coup for Norwich, considering where they are.
This is like house hunting, isn't it? You walk into a house that you very low expectations for. You walk in, there's a bit of damp on the wall. You're not too happy with it, but you see the vision. You see what it could become, and I think that's what's happened here. I think Clement and Napa went into this conversation without any expectations, because I do agree with a lot of the sentiments surrounding Clement. I do think he's probably above the Norwich job. Look, he's got experience in Europe. He's won trophies in Belgium. He's obviously won trophy in Scotland. He's got a very good win record as well. So I do think he is above the job. That's not a disrespect to Norwich. They're very low down in the Championship, and they're in a bit of bother. So I think this was a low expectation conversation where actually, the vision of the club's come through here and convinced all parties that this could be perfect, and everything's aligning with that vision where it could be positive. But the crux of the matter is Clement's got to come in, adapt to the league, adapt to the intensity of the league, and pick up results very, very quickly. Very, very quickly, because if they don't, they can get cut adrift also very, very quickly. So there's pressure there. There's a lot of pressure there.
He's got a very tough start away at Birmingham this coming weekend, which we'll talk about more in tomorrow's preview show. But let's move on just into Middlesbrough, who were reportedly set to appoint their new manager following the departure of Rob Edwards. Kim Hellberg from Swedish side Hammarby. Now, this is a funny one because for several days it looked as if he was heading to Swansea, but Borough have reportedly hijacked that move, although it may not be confirmed until next week due to things like work permits and what have you. And so the interim manager, Adi Vivesh, is expected to be in charge of the game this weekend away at Oxford, potentially in charge for a huge clash against Coventry in midweek. So we'll wait and see on that front. But what a mad few days it's been following this story, Justin.
Yeah, there's I think fair play to Middlesbrough. They've kept everything quiet. Even links to managers has been very, very low because they've all been tentative ones to Gary O'Neill, conversational to Steven Gerrard. There's nothing been clear cut.
Well, you say that. There was Raphael Wicki, who's the manager of Young Boys, who up until this link came through with Hellberg, it looked like they were getting him instead. And so that looked like it was going to happen, and then this came through after they snatched him away from Swansea. But
that's the craziness of this story, is everything's been kept very quiet. That Vicky news broke when things were quite advanced, and the same with Kim Hellberg as well. Things have been quite advanced, and we've not heard a lot. So for it to snowball as quickly as it has, I think fair play to everyone behind the scenes at Middlesbrough for keeping this whole process quiet and quick as well. I think that's the important thing. It's been quick. They're not giving Adi Vivesh 4 or 5 weeks, as we've seen in the past a lot of teams do. So, the process has been quick, it's been quiet, but it's been deadly and clinical.
Yeah, on Hellberg, I will admit I don't know a lot about him. This is a very hipster choice by Middlesbrough. The data lads who you see on...
I like it.
that explains a lot why you like it, yeah. The data lads who you see on Twitter bloody love this guy. I don't wear a beanie hat, nor do I drink Brewdog IPAs. So I hadn't heard of him until last week. But I usually do hold the data lads' opinions in high regard. And I'm not going to be any different here because he seems to have done very well in Sweden. Firstly, at Värnamo, keeping them up in their first ever season in the Swedish top flight, eventually guiding them to 5th. That led to him getting the job at Hammarby, where they finished 2nd for the last 2 seasons. And Middlesbrough will definitely take 2nd right now. But you look at the underlying data, Hammarby have been very impressive. On the numbers alone, they've been the best team in Sweden, even though they've somehow not won the league. But in every single metric, they have excelled, really. As far as Hellberg's concerned with his style of play, he likes to play passing football, also like to press high up the pitch when they don't have the ball. It's not too dissimilar from how Middlesbrough have been playing this season, really. So Borough should be an entertaining watch at the very least under this guy. I'm excited to see how he gets on. But what I would say is, considering this is Borough's best chance at promotion in many years, does also feel like a big risk, Justin.
It's a risk, but it could be a masterstroke. We've seen Graham Potter, Marty Cifuentes. They've both come from Sweden and been a success. Cifuentes less so than Potter, obviously. They come into the Championship, they've adapted quickly and started to get results quickly at the clubs that they joined. I disagree to some extent. That there's a lot of Hellberg that I like that Rob Edwards didn't do. And I think he's a massive upgrade on Rob Edwards. There's a directness, there's a press. He wants to play through central areas. Rob Edwards was very structured in how he wanted his teams to set up, and they play through the wings, whereas I think there's more flexibility in how Borough will attack, and they'll be very aggressive in the press under Hellberg. So there's a lot of excitement there, and like you said, he's a hipster choice, and hipster choices are risky, but why not? Borough in a very healthy position, and they can go for it. It does feel a little bit like Michael Carrick, because data-wise, everything backed up Michael Carrick, and they've gone back to that element. But like I said, I do like this one.
Yeah, I don't know what you mean about the directness bit, because as far as I'm aware, he's a very passing, keep it on the ground kind
directness,
of
I think, is much broader than just playing the ball high. It's getting the ball into good areas quickly. It's pressing. I think there's a lot more that encompasses directness than just. It
seems very tiki-taka-esque, which is what the impression I'm getting from what I've read on Hellberg anyway. Whether he actually goes with that approach, I don't know, because managers do sometimes change that, as we seen with Rob Edwards this season. There've been a lot more passing this season, and that'll be interesting to see how he does approach things. I think you talk about the managers who have come from Sweden before. Yeah, that's absolutely fine, but obviously the Championship is quite the jump up from the Swedish leagues. No disrespect to any Swedish listeners we have, but that's the fact of it. But yeah, Potter was a success. Cifuentes has been a success to an extent. And Middlesbrough need Hellberg to be a success. But from everything I'm reading, he could be basically what Michael Carrick was trying to do, with limited success in the final 2 years of his spell at the Riverside. So, yeah, it's an exciting appointment without a doubt. And it's going to be very, very intriguing to see how he gets on up at Borough. Let's move on, Justin. And before we get on to some more news, may I take this opportunity to point everyone in the direction of the latest video on the second tier YouTube channel. It's the most improved 11 in the Championship this season. That's right. I've put together an 11 of the players who have seen the most significant enhancement in their performances, which is always a bit of a double-edged sword, because while I'm complimenting their performances this season, it does also mean they weren't great last season. But out of all the players in the Championship, who do you think has been the most improved this season, Justin?
I think Kiefer Moore.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, that's not who I was expecting you to say. Go on.
No, I think Kiefer Moore. He didn't really hit the heights we know he can hit at Sheffield United last season. He wasn't great. Let's completely eradicate from our memories what happened in the playoff final. We know what happened, but performance preceding that, he just wasn't the Kiefer Moore we know, and he wasn't the Kiefer Moore that I love. But he's found a bit of that at Wrexham this season, and I'm really pleased for him. I'm really pleased for him, because I think if you play to his strengths, he's one of the most difficult forwards to play against. And he's showing that with the old Red Dragons. Yeah, go on then.
We have done a poll on that YouTube video for who the viewers/listeners think is the most improved player in the Championship this season. Brandon Thomas Asante got 41%, Justin. Yeah. Ryan Giles got 34%. Yeah. Carlton Morris, 12%. Someone else got 12%. So there you go. A vast spectrum of players there, ladies and gents. If you want to find out who else was included in the most improved 11, then the only way to find out is by viewing that video on the second tier YouTube channel. But let's get back onto some of the news from across the past few days, Justin. We'll get on to Swansea City, who were left having to scramble around after Kim Hellberg was stolen from under their nose, as I was alluding to just a second ago. Russell Martin continues to be linked with a return, but reportedly, former Liverpool coach Vítor Matos is a contender for the job. The 37-year-old worked under Jurgen Klopp as an elite development coach for 5 years prior to his departure. He briefly went to be assistant to Pep Lijnders at Red Bull Salzburg, but only lasted 6 months, and has been the head coach at Portuguese side Maritimo since June. So what do we think to this potentially happening, Justin?
Yeah, he's the one I'm most curious about, mainly because he's probably the one I'm least convinced by. Of the managerial news we've had this last couple of weeks, the likes of Hellberg and Clement. But look, he's been a part of the Red Bull system. He's been at Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp, so you're going to expect in terms of style, the fast transitions, aggressive football. But he also carries the most uncertainty because of his inexperience. You know, second tier Portuguese side isn't spectacular, but look, I think the position you've got here with Swansea is they like to take a risk. They were acknowledging that with the potential appointment of Kim Hellberg. But if you go back years, Roberto Martinez was a risk, Brendan Rodgers was a risk, Michael Laudrup was a risk, Graham Potter, Steve Cooper, they all spring to mind of Swansea's success when they've taken risks, even Gary Monk maybe to a certain extent. do think Kim Hellberg would have been perfect. But I think that goes without saying. But I think he's got a similar profile or blueprint to what Matos carries. And maybe, actually, this is the other point that's worth bringing up. Perhaps the relationship with Liverpool and the development of his past experience, i.e., bringing players on, could be massively beneficial to Swansea in terms of bringing in quality loan players.
Yeah, well, if that is a potential benefit, then that'll be very welcomed, wouldn't it? I will point out, just before we move on from him, Swansea did have the chance to get Kim Hellberg in the summer. Reports say that they spoke to him, but decided to go with Alan Sheehan instead. So only time will tell how costly a mistake that
Kim
ends up being.
Hellberg's just given him middle finger, hasn't he? You had your chance, lads. Fuck off.
Yeah, completely understandably, I say. But yeah, unsurprisingly, I haven't watched much of the Portuguese second tier to get a good grasp of Vítor Matos, and even if I did, he's only had 11 games in charge, so is that really a good enough sample size to judge him on? What he's like as a manager, I don't really know, but as a coach, he's clearly very talented. You're not in charge of player development at a club like Liverpool for 5 years if you're not top class at making players better. And I look at Swansea, one of the youngest squads in the division. That makes a lot of sense. I was reading an interview with him by the training ground guru from earlier this year, and he was saying he's not that bothered about things like a big budget. For him, it's about building and developing what he's got and having a connection with the club's board. Why are you laughing?
If you say that, then Swansea are going to go, yeah, fine then. Pennies.
Well, maybe, but I guess they don't have the biggest budgets anyway, but that's by the by. But yeah, as I say, he's more about developing what he's got, and that sounds ideal for Swansea because, let's be honest, they're probably not going to be trouble in the playoff picture this season, maybe not even next season. But if Matos can get them going in the right direction again, that'll be a job well done from him, won't it?
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt. I think Alan Sheehan laid some good foundations. He did. I think in terms of squad shape, it's the best squad we've seen at Swansea since they came down from the Premier League. It's the most money they've spent on it since they came down from the Premier League. There are two big factors there. And there are some solid foundations that a new manager can come in and work with, which is important. You've just got to find a little bit more expression in that final third and make them a lot more interesting to watch while bringing fans back to the ground. I think Swansea, no disrespect to the club or the fans, it's been one of the deadest atmospheres I've heard when reviewing games. And therefore, it's very hard to engage. It's very hard to engage, I imagine, as a supporter. So you need a manager who's going to come in to create an atmosphere that not only is vibrant, but gets bums off seats as well.
Yeah, well, it's the classic thing, isn't it? He's clearly a very talented coach. Is he a good manager? We don't know because how much can we judge from 11 games in the Portuguese second tier? Only time will tell on that front. So it's an interesting appointment. And as you say, Swansea have got a history of almost giving managers their first chance in the job, really, on these shores. And this will be another one to add to the lineup if it does come off. Well, the final managerial vacancy in the Championship is at Southampton, who appear to still be in no hurry to get an appointment. There were reports earlier in the international break that interim manager Tonda Eckert was going to be given the job full time, but the Daily Echo say he's expected to be given the 3 matches this coming week as the interim, and then the situation will be reviewed. The club have spoken to other managers, but no one has apparently stood out so far. So, look, we were told Eckert was going to be given a fair crack at the job, and that's definitely proving to be the case.
Yeah, look, I think Eckert's doing a great job initially, but I fear this is going to be a 3-manager season for Southampton if they go down the Tonda Eckert route. He does deserve an opportunity to prove himself, and like I said, he's got a bit of confidence back into that team, mainly because things have been simplified, and that's important. So confidence is slowly coming back, but caretakers and interims are there for a reason. I'm scorned by recency bias of Alan Sheehan. That's gone awry. The other examples I can think of, other than Frankie McAvoy at Preston, are Rob Kelly at Leicester, Neil Redfern at Leeds as well. There are examples of it working out.
You're going back a long way.
Oh yeah, I had to go back a long way. There are examples of it working out, and then there are examples of it not working out. But I feel that Southampton are a curious case and a very specific case because it just feels like they're making an easy decision because of winning games. And I feel like you've got a very fragile team here, and it carries a lot of risk, and it needs an experienced head to handle the moments when it does get tough. I don't think Eckert's got that, and that's the worry I've got. Funnily enough, someone like Daniel Farke I think is perfect because his style of play meets development, meets positive man management. He's not available, but there's a blueprint of a manager there that you should be following, not giving managers their first stints at what is a very difficult club to manage right now.
Yeah, well, a lot of you say is valid there. I don't want to just tar him with the brush of, oh, he's a caretaker going into a management job. That means he's going to be a failure, because I don't think that's fair on him. But he is a very interesting case because Southampton's owners clearly rate him very highly, don't they? And I imagine the thought process when they got him in, because he was brought in over the summer at the same time Will Still was appointed. I imagine what they were thinking was, we give Will Still the job, let him work his magic on us, and then Eckert can take over when Still either gets poached or sacked. Maybe I'm giving Southampton too much credit there, but it seems like a good plan on paper in the long term. Obviously, that plan has now gone out the window because of how everything went under Will Still. And so it seems to me like they want to keep this guy around, but at the same time have a slight fear that it might be a bit too early with him, because after all, he is just 32. He's the youngest manager in Championship history. I don't know, but they're clearly keen to give him a chance. And he has got 2 wins in 2 so far. That's good. One was an unconvincing win against QPR. The other one was against Sheffield Wednesday, who we all know are struggling to put outside. So we need to see more proof in the pudding. Maybe he will turn out to be an unbelievable coach, but it is also interesting how Southampton have spent a lot of money over the summer and yet still seem pretty laid back about the whole idea of, getting promoted again, which feels like it's quite a big thing.
Maybe they're conceding the fact that they're quite far off it and it might be a bit of a struggle and they need a parachute season where...
They're not that far off there. They're only 7 points off the top 6. So it's perfectly salvageable, I think.
Well, they could end up like Sheffield United, where they get into the playoffs and and are that scarred by a bad experience that next season goes wrong as well. I just, maybe there's an element of them conceding a little bit here. I don't know. They're such a hard football club to put a finger on, because I'm not convinced by decision making. I'm not convinced by decision making at all, both in recruitment, managerial selection, before Will Still, and obviously with what they're doing now, they seem to be dragging their heels where they've got clubs around them who are being very proactive in their search.
Yeah, well, that seems completely fair considering where Southampton have gone in the time that Sports Republic have been running the club. Yeah. But let's move away from managerial news and look at what's going on at Leicester City, where a big shake-up is happening in the boardroom. Of course, the hierarchy there have come under a lot of criticism in recent years following relegation twice from the Premier League. The main target for that criticism has been Director of Football Jon Rudkin, who, according to The Telegraph, is moving, quote, upstairs, which sounds like something you tell your kids when the dog's died. And things like recruitment and scouting will be handed over to a new technical director who's set to be appointed. But the main thing here, Justin, is there at least appears to be acceptance that something has to change at Leicester after years of a lot of bad decision making.
Well, it's a shame it's come almost 2 years too late, because all of these decisions and the rest, these decisions were probably critical 2 years ago when they came down from the Premier League and appointed Enzo Maresca, who papered over some very, very big cracks. Very, very big cracks. These decisions needed to be made a long time ago, and they haven't. And they're now they're a pinnacle point, I think, in their next few years where they need to get the decisions right, because they're going to come under scrutiny for a lot of reasons, i.e. financial fair play. Belt's going to be tighter. They've got to really get things right now. They can't afford to make too many decisions. I'd argue that maybe the current ownership ran its course with the football club, and maybe new investment and new ideas need to come in. Maybe this shake-up upstairs will do the job that needs to be done at Leicester to guide them on a new path. But whatever it is, it's a bit too late for me.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is. From an outsider perspective, it seems astonishing that Jon Rudkin still has a job at Leicester, considering them going from FA Cup winners, competing in Europe, to Championship mid-table seems to have been almost completely down to his decision-making, as well as their numerous scrapes with PSR. But he's quite clearly very close to the owner, isn't he? And that appears to be the only reason why he's still employed there. And as I say, it is good that Leicester recognise something needs to change. It's interesting what you say about the owner, because there have been suggestions that he was thinking of moving on. Kuhn Top, this is. But I would guess that these changes mean he doesn't plan on leaving anytime soon. I don't know if you got a take on that, Justin.
Well, no, I think that's right. I think he's trying to squeeze out the little bit of hope that he maybe has that he can turn things around. But ultimately, the club needs a reset. Whether that's a reset in a sense that all the high earners have to go in the next couple of years, and they spend a lot of time.
That's got to happen, effectively, hasn't it?
Well, unless they get promoted this season, but that's going to be difficult with potential points deductions and whatnot. There's a lot of deadwood around at that club that needs to be moved on. They've never sourced a replacement for Jamie Vardy. They've always invested terribly, like Kelechi Iheanacho, for example. Patson Daka is another one. There's just a lot of, if I put it bluntly, guff at the club that needs to be gone. And that's not going to happen in 1 year. It's going to take a while to get it through. It feels like the owner's trying to salvage something that is unsalvageable.
I'm not sure it's unsalvageable, but they have to move players on. The problem they've found themselves in is because they've made such bad decisions when it comes to transfers in recent years and given players big fat contracts with years still to run on them, it means that they can't move these players on because no one flipping wants them. So that's the issue they've found themselves in, and that's why they keep having these breaches with PSR. Speaking of which, the hearing is set to begin next month over their alleged breaches of PSR. The Premier League gave them 3 new charges back in May. It's after they lost a total of more than £200 million in the 3 years leading up to June the 30th, 2024. If found guilty, Leicester could be given a points deduction, and a decision isn't expected until the end of this year at the earliest. So watch this space. And we'll finish off with Sheffield Wednesday, who have been given permission to sign free agents again, albeit only 2 for now. But it's a start. Former Leeds captain Liam Cooper has been confirmed. That's been in the works for a while, and they were just kind of waiting for permission to sign players again before that one could come in. They haven't made a second signing just yet, but the Sheffield Star says Duncan Watmore and Nathan Redmond have been training with the club. Bloody hell, Nathan Redmond. Easy to forget about him, isn't it? What do we think to those two, Justin?
What are they doing with Duncan Watmore and Nathan Redmond to make them compete for a contract? Are they just training, or are we going to see some sort of Hunger Games? If they stream it on Twitch,
something like that,
they can make some money.
That would be a good way to earn some money, actually.
Exactly.
For Sheffield Wednesday, get them out of admin. Sorted. Exactly. Sounds good.
Exactly. This is what they should be doing. But I think, firstly, Liam Cooper's a shrewd signing for Matters. I think we've already discussed when he first started training for the club a while ago.
Back in August.
Yeah. I'm annoyed we didn't see a CSK Sofia announcement as we saw when he was announced there years ago. But with Watmore and Redmond, there's clearly a profile of player that they're after, a winger, someone who can dribble.
Yeah. FSA award-nominated podcast analysis right there.
Yeah, but it's hard. They've not played a lot of football in recent years, or not had too much impact on the football pitch in recent years. And that, unfortunately, is the market that Sheffield Wednesday are batting around in. But weirdly, I think Duncan Watmore is the one that excites me the most because for some reason he has the ability to go on world-class runs of form for 5 or 6 games and then he will just disappear for 3 months and then it will happen again. And he's a player that if he's on it, if he fancies it, he's unplayable. And I mean that. Nathan Redmond, where was he last? Was he at Burnley?
Burnley, yeah. Which is ridiculous, isn't it? I cannot recall him at all playing in a Burnley shirt, but he unbelievably was. But yeah, Watmore, you're absolutely right. I remember him when he was at Middlesbrough and to a lesser extent Millwall, where he would have these ridiculous runs of form and score some unbelievable goals and then, as you say, not do anything for a while.
Genuinely, not a player better in England if he's on it for 5 games. And then he's disappears.
Get him on the plane, Thomas. What are you thinking? But yeah, speaking of get him on the plane, bloody Nathan Redmond played for England back in 2017, which I completely forgot. Yeah, mad, isn't it? And the crazy thing is, do you know how old Nathan Redmond is now?
He's like 31.
Yeah, he is 31. Yeah, insane. I could not believe that when I saw how old he was, but that goes to show how much his career's gone off the deep end in like the last 2 years. But for Sheffield Wednesday, he could definitely do a job because, you know, as I say, played for England not that long ago. As long as he stays fit, of course, that's the big thing. But Sheffield Wednesday just need bodies, don't they? They need bodies who have played some form of competitive action at this kind of level before, whereas a lot of their academy players obviously haven't and have been having to be drafted in at various stages this season. So, yeah, any former bodies will be fine. I'm hoping at some point, Justin, we'll be able to see Wednesday sign more than just 2 free agents, because then we could see a Wednesday side who are actually fairly competitive in the second half of the season. Not going to stay up. Let's not get carried away, because they've not got another points deduction on the horizon. But if we have that, then they could be a decent little side in the second half of the season. Quite a difficult team to take apart. So that'll be interesting. Speaking of which, Steel City Derby this weekend. That will be discussed in great depth in tomorrow's preview show, ladies and gents. That's when we'll next be back in the preview show tomorrow to look ahead to all the weekend's action across the Championship, including, of course, the big game in Sheffield. So we look forward to seeing you then for that. But this has been the Second Tier Podcast. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.